Welcome to the CloudPod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Matthew.
Episode 242, recorded for the week of January 3rd, 2023. DoH, DNS over HTTPS. One more way for it to be DNS's fault. Good evening, Jonathan, Matt, and Ryan.
Hey guys.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It feels a lot like 2023, but just 2024. And actually, I think I even said the date wrong when I said it, just to make it. I know that I notice it, but I won't fix it because we're not that professional of a podcast. It's one of many times I've written the wrong date this week already. So there you go. Yeah. We had a good episode last week where we covered out 2023 and we wrapped things up. And Matt did a bunch of research to figure out how many announcements came from both AWS and Azure by mining the depths of the RSS feeds and my show notes. And then we totally forgot about it because we suck. And so Matt, you did something for us last week for the recap show that I thought we should follow up with. And what is that exactly, Matt? What did you do?
I'm not sure. I was actually trying to make sure the numbers were accurate to the last day, but we'll go with the numbers I had. So I was curious when we were doing the review of the 2023 of how many announcements the cloud actually had put out there. And Google's was a little bit harder to figure out. But I went through and looked at AWS and Azure. And for Azure, specifically what was GA'd, because they have a nice filter on their page. Unlike AWS, where you just have to look through lots and lots of fun announcements. But out of curiosity, does anybody have a guess of how many AWS announcements there were last year?
271.
Are we just GA announcements?
All announcements, because I couldn't filter.
All announcements? I would say it was 1,700.
Whoa.
Right.
304.
2,697.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And that was whatever day we recorded. So there was a few days left in the year. So there might be a few extras.
They didn't really do anything after we recorded because it was New Year's weekend, all that. But yeah, that's a lot. I was pretty close. I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do look at them every week. So
yeah.
I know how many I ignored when I did show notes. And, the one thing, I was looking at when you were talking about how many things, we had 250 pages in the 2023 show note archive. So every episode, the show notes that we use to record the show, I archive them off. And that's how we do figure out best favorite announcements of the year. And I go back and look at this when you guys were like, didn't we talk about that once? And I can go find it and say, yes, we did talk about it and what episode it was. And I have them for every episode of the podcast we've ever done since number one. But I reset the file every year and create a new one. And so, last year was 250 pages. So, it was a lot of news for all the cloud providers, let alone Amazon. And last year we cut down quite a bit because we got rid of the lightning round. And I was much more murderous in my show topic titling selection because if it wasn't interesting enough to me to talk about, I decided it wasn't worthy. And so then sometimes you guys will come back and say like, hey, why didn't you talk about this show? And I'll be like, fine, we'll talk about it now because you cared. But otherwise, if I didn't care and you guys didn't say anything, I just... So.
Okay, so what about for Azure? Just GA announcements.
Oh, just GA for Azure? That's like 80.
Jonathan?
Does that include like announcing things in regions which previously didn't have it, or is this like new things?
This is just general availability. So.
And now I have to go look up to see what that was. And obviously I did this, over a week ago, so I don't have anything open.
45.
Under the announcement has a filter, and I put now available.
Okay, 45.
I think they renamed since last week.
Okay, 5 million on 45, of which 5 million were AI and 45 were not AI.
Yeah.
Right.
800.
Well, one, I also like this announcement that we definitely need to talk about. Generally available, AKS supports API breaking changes. Cool. Sweet. 521.
I'm shocked it was that high.
Yeah.
I think if you did Google, it had to be pretty low. I mean, there's a RSS feed that I actually just remembered that you probably would have wanted, but I don't think it actually existed for the full year. So I think it doesn't go back. But for next year, you'll have a good RSS feed to get that for Google.
I actually pulled it from like the actual web page and then, just count a number per page times how many pages we're in 2023 and Google's.
I mean, what, you didn't want to mess with XML files? You could have used machine learning on XML of the RSS feed.
I wonder actually if I just asked. Well, I guess all the OpenAI stuff has end dates and stuff, so it wouldn't have been up to the last minute.
Yeah, the problem is they're all behind all the time. Yeah, but you could create your own model and just feed the RSS feeds into your own model, and then you would control the expense and how up to date it is. And
then I have officially stopped caring about doing this.
Yeah, and you're
way too much work
if you did it. So that's how it went for the show note automation that Ryan promised me 3 years ago. He's lost interest too. Yeah, he had to authenticate with the Google Doc, and he was like, "I'm out." Screw that.
Now I'm trying to do it because I'm insane. Mm-hmm. So now we're gonna pull Ryan Lucas back into that project. So about 2026, you'll get it.
You guys are gonna complain about it for so long that Jonathan's just gonna be like, you idiots, and go find some piece of open source code that someone else already wrote and just plug it into a Python and give it to you. That's how it probably will go down. That's how it goes when I'm doing stuff. Jonathan just is like, here's a code snippet. Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate it. All right, well, let's get to news, since we are terrible at estimating the number of announcements that came out on Azure, because I was nowhere close to 800 on that one, like 10x less than I should have been. I mean, I do black out most of the Azure announcements just for posterity's sake.
You're better off. It's fine.
All right, let's go to our favorite segment of AI is how ML makes money, which the monies are coming fast and furious, apparently, according to the Information's article. OpenAI's annualized revenue topped $1.6 billion as customers shrugged off the CEO drama. And they are able to say that because they had a number from two internal sources from mid-October that their annual revenue for the year was $1.3 billion. And by end of year, about mid-December timeframe, it was $1.6 billion, which is a 20% growth rate over 2 months. And this happened all, of course, during the craziness of the OpenAI board fiasco that you guys talked about a few weeks ago here on the show, and I was out. And this basically roughly means OpenAI is making over $130 million a month for the sales of subscriptions. And yes, I'm paying them $20 a month, so I'm included in that number.
Is that profit or just revenue?
That's revenue.
Okay, so they're not announcing like their operating costs, like, because if it was already like a profitable business this early, I would be shocked.
And they would have gone public,
right? Immediately, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure this is they made $1.3 billion or $1.6 billion in revenue, and they spent $25 billion. I'm pretty sure that's the current scenario in the OpenAI business books. But yeah, that's why they had to get $10 billion investment from Amazon or from Azure just to pay their own bill.
Yeah, and I thought some of the board drama was about sort of the direction of making money or not, and differences that surrounded that. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. And also, I think there was some safety stuff and AI ethics, integrity, disagreements about you can make it less safe, but should you? And that I think is still something they're trying to figure out. But those board members are gone, so now they can do whatever they want to.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to AWS. It was a very quiet couple of weeks, so the stories are not super exciting. First up, AWS Canada West, or the Calgary region, is now available. CA-West-1 has opened as the 33rd AWS region with 3 AZs, with 70 services available at launch, available for all your Canadian needs.
Nice.
Is that the second one in Canada?
This is the third, I think, because Montreal is one of them, and there is one in Vancouver, I think. I'm double checking right now.
I thought it was the second, but then I wasn't sure if I was confusing AWS and Azure.
I mean, I might be confusing them as well.
Yeah, it's only the second.
Okay, because I mean, it makes sense because we definitely deal with at my day job. A lot of customers that want data to live in certain countries, so you kind of have to have the secondary regions there to support true DR.
So the other confusion is that there's also local zones, and there is Vancouver local zone, as well as Toronto, and just those two local zones. So that's that makes it harder to remember which ones are which. So now you have 2 full regions in Canada, which is about time. All right, I'm done with Canadians. That's all I got.
If I was Canadian, I'd apologize on behalf of the podcast, but I'm not.
I apologize for my bad jokes. I'm excited to announce the DoH protocol, or DoH, which is DNS over HTTPS, continues to take over the world, coming for your Route 53 resolver with support for DNS over HTTPS protocol for both inbound and outbound resolver endpoints. Ryan actually read this article earlier, and he mentioned to me that it's a requirement for FIPS, which I did not know. But apparently a FIPS compliance requirement for DoH or DoH-FIPS for inbound endpoints is available with this, as well as all your TLS-based encryption and UDP and TCP capabilities over port 4053, which is the DoH 53 versus the DoH, which is the HTTPS.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting because I hadn't heard of that specific compliance need for FIPS before. And, like DNSSEC has been around for a very long time, and it's just barely made it fairly recently into a lot of these compliance implementations. And so this is moving quite fast. And I was curious on how they were, actually going to set this up, because I was trying to figure out if they were going to configure clients for HTTPS transactions, but it doesn't seem to be really at the client level, or at least at the end client. It's more of configurations you put on your, conditional forwarders elsewhere in your domain, so that you can talk over a secure protocol, which is pretty cool.
I guess, eventually I'd assume it ends up at endpoints as well, wouldn't you? Or do you think it never gets to endpoints based on your limited knowledge of this?
I can see it being an option where maybe you configure your local client. DNS is one of those things where, most people don't think about it. It's just sort of one of the magic ways the internet just goes. I thought it was pretty interesting that they were posturing this as sort of a zero trust implementation. And so that was sort of what piqued my interest, because I thought that they were trying to do sort of that end client resolver. And I don't know, I can see a major sea change, but as long as it's taken IPv6 to take off and some of these other sort of lower level configurations, I think UDP port 53 DNS is probably going to be here for quite a while.
There's also apparently a DNS over TLS, which I'm not really sure why that's different than over HTTPS, because they both implement a TLS protocol. So sort of weird. But I was curious here if I could query that. I can't just run a simple curl command, but you have to do an HTTP header to do application/DNS-JSON or DNS-message, depending on what you want to get back. And then you can basically pass it into JQ, everyone's favorite tool, and get an output of that. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, I guess even in a web, you could use it in a web application if you wanted to do DNS lookup that way versus using your Route 53 UDP protocol. But I think that would be, I don't know how you get from the web browser or a web application down into lower level stack to provide maybe just give it an IP address at that point. Anyways, lots of questions, not a lot of details at this moment for me. But glad to know it's there, especially if you need to do FIPS compliance.
Yeah, in Ubuntu at least, you can install a DNS dist and then configure that to reach out to HTTPS, but then you configure the local things to point to your local resolver. So it's still slightly abstracted from the apps, but still local.
And that was the sort of the walkthrough that was behind the blog post. It walks you through that setup where you're actually setting it up on your forwarding domain that could be in your data center or in your office or your home, pointed to a Route 53 zone, which is configured for HTTPS. It's kind of neat.
Well, this is one of those weird blog posts that we typically don't cover, but it's Slow News Week. So Justin Garrison, who is a DevRel at Amazon, at least he was as of December 30th when he posted this blog post, which was Amazon Silent Sacking. He's a DevRel on the Kubernetes team for EKS. And basically, he talks about all the layoffs that occurred since 2023, the return to office policy, and the enforcement confusion around that, and that that's basically forced a lot of people to start leaving in droves or looking or waiting for their next RSU payout before finding something new. He basically concludes that anyone who's not basically over level 7 wants out of Amazon at this point. And that's because their total comp is between 400 and 800,000 for as much money they can put up with many inconveniences like return to office. As Amazon's pay is 40% stock, it's very tied to the stock price. And so they have a desperate need to increase the stock price as much as possible or keep it at high levels. And to do that, you have to keep lowering your operating costs, which means taking out people. He says that, while Amazon's continuing to grow, it's growing at a much slower rate, which we've talked about many times here. And that Amazon has been in an overall hiring freeze that he feels is going to definitely impact customers long term. So between the forced RTO and the silent attrition that's happening, basically he's saying 2 pizza box teams are decimated, and that the overall idea of them is great. They're the best implementation DevOps he's ever seen, but they require people and expense. And to make that not expensive, you move into centralized teams. And Amazon has never had either platform engineering or site reliability engineering capabilities. And so, the most likely situation is that you'll continue to see attrition, and we've seen attrition through Twitter of quite a few Amazon people. And basically that'll result in potentially major AWS outages in 2024, which is what we talked about. That's why I decided we should talk about this, because that's an interesting takeaway. He did mention that there has been an increase in large scale events at Amazon already, but many customers haven't noticed because they only have to update the dashboard of the customers who are impacted. And while overall, he does seem a bit jaded about his situation there, he is in a bad situation around his status, as he was told to find another gig, but none of the gigs in the company are available to him unless they want to take less money or lower title or have worse RTO options. And the lack of that had him ask for severance pay, which they've yet to give him. And so basically he's silently quitting, waiting for them to lay him off. And that's why I wrote a blog post to help accelerate that outcome. But overall, the key thing about it was really the outages part that I want to talk about, and kind of, do we consider the brain drain that we've seen at Amazon to be a risk that we should be worried about as cloud engineers?
Whenever there's these kind of internal manifestos about business, there's always there's sort of a threat or a veiled threat of that. And it doesn't really pay out. Even with Twitter, while there was low-level disruption, it was far less than the end is near cries that people were expecting when some of their changes were implemented. And so I've never really seen it pan out that way. That doesn't mean it won't affect the business, and it doesn't mean that things behind the scenes won't get harder to operate, and things will be harder to work on, and it'll be even more difficult to innovate, and things that we may not see as a customer, because there was a huge drove of people that left for sure.
So if they don't have SRE, like how do they scale those 2 pizza teams to run their services in 33 regions? Surely there's more to it than that.
Well, I mean, so they've talked about this, some of their processes and procedures, reinvent and stuff, and they have a huge pipeline. They've done a lot via instrumentation. So, teams can, as long as they're, pushing their changes through this pipeline, it automatically rolls out and automatically tests them. It's, and then you're just on the hook for your own service, which I kind of like. And that's, one of the unique things about the way Amazon structures these things. And they don't have that sort of central team that everything goes through. It's just all internal tooling. With that said, it is, if you're going to cut operating costs, that centralization is sort of key.
I mean, there is always some level of platform engineering, like you said, somebody has to build that pipeline that deploys to 33 regions.
Yeah, so they do. He did talk about pipelines, SDKs, and security are all centralized,
right?
And tooling. So that that makes sense. Those are centralized tools. But yeah, the reality is that they practice what they preach, which is they build cloud native applications that can scale and fault tolerant. And they do A/B testing, and they do canary deployments, and they do error rate detection, and they deal with stuff. So even when you're at Amazon, if you are on call, mostly the automation will take care of whatever the issues are, so you don't have to get woken up. And if they can't, then you get paged in and you have to deal with it. and you have ability to call larger scale incidents and pull in multiple teams. And I think why there are multiple 2 pizza box teams on some of the larger services. So there's probably depth through those multiple 2 pizza box teams. Newer products probably are limited to how many two pizza box teams they actually have, and that could be problematic. But the brain drain of those is, those people leaving is the bigger risk of that, because if you haven't had a centralized team to date, and now you want to try to centralize those things, you need to be able to train the centralized team. And that is problematic if all the people who built it are gone.
I mean, I always said, like, if you leave a company, things will run for a period of time. So if you're in IT and you leave, the servers are going to run for a little while. At one point, things will start to fail out, whether it's the hard drive, the software, whatever it is. So the question is, can they, being Amazon, make sure that they cross-train and get enough people up to speed that are still there before you start to see these outages?
It worked for Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had my services bit rot while I was still employed at a company, and I can't remember what I did 6 months ago. So I don't know, like at a certain point, there's what are you going to do? Like if you've moved on, even within the company, there's always a bit of reverse engineering and replacement that I think happens just naturally. And it's, there's no doubt it'll have an effect, but is it the catastrophe that people think it is? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be Amazon goes down like they did when S3 and US East 1 had to reboot years ago. That I think it's a lot more than years at this point, because I think that was like 16 or 17. But like, I think you're going to start to see parts of services fail because they have the 2 pizza box team and everything is more isolated out. So yeah, I think potentially different teams, that have had a lot more attrition will have failure. So maybe these specific APIs within RDS might have a problem, but it's not going to be all of RDS that completely dies.
Still kind of concerning in general, though, that they're forcing this return to office, and kind of wonder, are they forcing it to cut costs because they know people will drop out because they've overhired, or are they really dead set on having people return to office because I think that's the best thing? It's also going to impact their ability to execute on new products if they go a bunch of people.
I mean, that's where I think they'll be more impacted is their ability to innovate and release new changes and new services. I think that's going to be, they'll be behind the 8 ball in some of the AI research, and they'll be a little bit behind on just general quality of life improvements on the existing services.
But to be fair, I feel like Amazon is so far ahead on quality of life things that I don't think I'm going to notice.
Yeah. There's definitely, challenges around, those type of issues that we've seen, and the amount of things they announce, the amount of things that they can hide behind, they have ability. And, right now everyone just wants them to get AI. So as long as they're announcing AI shiny things, the stock market won't notice them either.
It's true. That is true.
Have you been waiting months and months to hire your new AWS, GCP, or Azure architect, only to have them be poached at the 11th hour by a startup with a juice bar? Initiatives stalled because you're having trouble hiring? Well, I have a simple solution: Foghorn Consulting. Foghorn Consulting provides top-notch cloud engineers to the world's most innovative companies and can be burning down your DevOps and cloud backlogs as soon as next week. Foghorn certified AWS, GCP, and Azure professionals are armed with infrastructure as code, and from day one will be designing performant, optimized cloud-native or hybrid environments that deliver on the promise of cloud. Their FogOps solution even provides on-demand cloud engineering to augment your existing teams. Visit www.foghornconsulting.com or send an email to cloudtalentnow@foghornconsulting.com and tell them the CloudPod sent you. Your dedicated FogOps team is with you for the long haul, and they bring their own juice.
All right, let's move on to our next story. Cloud CISO's perspective from GCP was released, which is their 2024 cybersecurity forecast report. This is a collaborative effort across several Google Cloud security teams, including Mandiant Intelligence, Mandiant Consulting, Chronicles Security Operations, Google Cloud's Office of the CISO, and VirusTotal. And if you are paying attention, one of those didn't seem to fit, which was the last one. I didn't know what that was. I had to go look it up, and I realized it was an acquisition they had done many months ago. There's 5 key points from their report around cybersecurity. Generative AI drive defender conversations. As CISOs become more accountable, so will the C-suite and boards. Expect more consolidation around SecOps, and attacks targeting hybrid and multi-cloud environments will have an increased impact, and collaboration and cybersecurity will increase across the workplace. So those are their big trends in 2024. Not a lot of really revolutionary stuff there, but the one that I thought was most interesting is really around the C-suite and the boards, because again, I'm an executive. But yeah, this is a big deal. So after SolarWinds basically got sued, for a lot of money by their shareholders, and the SEC basically fined them a lot of money. We're now in this world where the SEC has published new rules, basically, requiring liability directly to the CISO, and that you can be now found guilty for doing different things. And so that'll be required, CISOs to require individual accountability. They'll want more insurance and legal support, and clearly articulated accountabilities for cybersecurity and risk issues at the board and senior leadership level, which will make all of our jobs harder. So security is coming in a big way. It's been coming for a while, but now that there's actual dollar signs tied to these things, you will start seeing SEC rules starting to be enforced pretty aggressively across the CISO suite, as well as the other board members. The one of the interesting things too is like a lot of the issues that SolarWinds had is they had reports where they went to a security third party and they did a penetration test and they had findings, and then they didn't do anything with those findings. And so a lot of those documents now are going to become sort of things that become privileged or legal protected for businesses because of the ability for them to be found in discovery and the liability risk that they open up to your business. So expect to see a lot of changes in the way that those things start getting communicated and worked out with your CISO and your partners and your businesses.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm for that, right? Because I don't think that, hiding those things behind discovery rules or anything like that is really helping anything.
No, it makes it worse.
Yeah. And so it's, I don't, and I don't really think we're going to see a whole lot of board members be held accountable for the security. I really don't. I think they'll continue to scapegoat CISOs like they always have been. And, even with SolarWinds, like it's the CISO that's, being held accountable directly, which is new and unique. But I also don't know if it's really going to help the security practices and for these things. And it's just going to put people on the defensive, and they're not going to want to, do penetration tests. They're not going to want to test those securities if that thing can all be used directly to hold them accountable or just be interpreted the wrong way.
I'm just worried nobody will want to be a CISO in the future. Who's going to want to take on that risk? I mean, who will want to join a company because they need a CISO, presumably because they've got problems that need to be fixed, knowing that there's problems that haven't been fixed? What a huge amount of risk to take on, unless there are some rules around where you get like a 3 to 6 month period of time by at which you're not liable, but perhaps there's more transparency in actions that you take or information that you have. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I wouldn't want to be a CISO, knowing that I'm going to be personally accountable for the failure of the company to execute on implementing necessary security.
My only hope with a lot of this is hopefully that means a lot of this will mean that the CISO actually gets more, my brain just died, like power, leverage, the ability to work with other teams to say, look, there are these vulnerabilities. This needs to get into your next sprint and release with the next, version of the product. Not, we'll just keep getting to it and blow them off. Hopefully this means that, there will be talks at higher levels and say, no, this stuff actually needs to get fixed. Sure, it's, a specific package as a vulnerability, but like you actually need to go fix it, not be like, it's fine. It's like behind these other things, when people actually will take security into consideration when they build and design products day one too.
I think it's also important to recognize that, the SEC's filing is specifically about the fraud and the alleged sort of statements to public, about their cybersecurity practices. And I think it's very different from actually managing security, which, is obviously not, wasn't good either. But, like the liability part, like it's always the cover up that's, worse than the crime. Right? So it's like, I hope that, I I hope that through the trial and the finding, which I assume, I don't know, I guess SEC changes go through, the motions. I hope that we get, enough information to realize just, if there was actually any wrongdoing, if it was actually fraud, or was it, is it, sort of, if you are skeptical about those actions, or, if you give a, no, my brain just died. Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
It's that first week of the year, haven't quite, got it off the cobwebs of staying up to midnight.
I think part of the problem is that some of the controls are just really poorly worded. They're worded in ways which are easy to not implement in the way in which they're intended. Things just become checkboxes. Do you have a control that, or do you have some way of implementing this particular control? Yes, we do. Does it work? Maybe. Is it as good as it should be? No. I think some of the controls should be, especially around finance and healthcare, should be a lot more prescriptive than they are today. But it kind of makes me think. I mean, even if SolarWinds was about the fraud, think about like Mr. Cooper losing how many 146 million customers' personal information, bank account numbers, social security numbers, names and addresses. Like, how? I don't care if there's no fraud involved there. That's a complete failure to secure that data. They should be held accountable.
I think the company should be held accountable for sure. But the individuals within that company, like, I don't know. Like, but that's the part I get a little bit, weirded out about, just because, especially since the language in the SEC's complaint is very vague about what actually is a false and misleading statement. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't really get into the specifics of this is where, and I can read through it and I can interpret it either way, right? It's like the password policy wasn't really protecting the security of the environment is one way to look at it, but also sort of there's a password policy, and like, it's made so that it can be usable, and you can sort of hem and haw and litigate sort of what that security best practice is, and weigh that against the operations of the business. And like, everything's going to be a compromise, and it's an attack, right? So it's like, what's a complete failure if there's a new type of breach and your layers break down? Like, is it the company's fault for being attacked? It's tricky to say. Like, I think these things have to be sort of weighed as individuals.
That's fair. I mean, we don't have enough data yet, but the fact that information could be lost, presumably as easily as it was. I mean, there better have been some serious inside job with access to encryption keys, or some unpredictable, some black swan of a failure which led to this kind of thing happening. But it probably wasn't. It was probably something dumb. It was probably an email that somebody clicked and opened.
Or, the load balancer forwarding to the S3 bucket. Yeah, no, I mean, it's...
The biggest risk to most companies is the end users, and there's only so much you can protect against at one point. So, all those phishing training that I'm sure all of us has done, and when you start a new job, or your yearly cybersecurity training that, is there for a reason, but, one wrong person with the wrong access, then to move laterally and kind of go from there. Most companies, it's not if you're going to get hacked at this point, it's more when. And making sure that you have your data isolated and, enough controls in place, enough monitoring in place that you find it quick enough. Maybe that's a grim view on the world, but that's where I feel like we are.
I think failures like this are just going to drive changes in technology. I mean, there's no reason they should have my social security number beyond the initial verification of identity, for example. Like, why aren't we using hashes? Why can't they go to the Social Security website and say, give me a temporary number, give me a code that I can pass to Mr. Cooper or somebody else that they can use to verify my identity, which is basically unusable by anybody else if it's ever stolen, or revocable. But there's the fact that we walk around with these 10-digit numbers which stick with us for life, and once they're lost, and you can't ever get a new one. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. No, I think there's some things where it's, we have to adapt to the technology changes. And I think that social security numbers are a pretty strong evidence, of like, that's the old way, right? This used to make a lot more sense, because it was hard to get that.
Well, it was just a number that they chose because it was something that everybody had assigned for social security benefits. But yeah, it's very quickly proven to be a really bad choice. And so, what its original purpose is, it should be a social security number to get you social security when you're retiring. And that's why there's no incentive for the government to change the model because it's serving its one purpose, which is getting you its retirement benefits. The fact that we then layered on an entire credit risk management program on top of it is why that's a problem. And so those companies had to be incentivized to give you a different identifier, tied to something that is changeable or something that they can control or you can give temporary access to. And it's really on the credit bureaus, in my opinion, to fix that problem.
All I can think about is Mr. Burns in The Simpsons going, social security number 0000001. Damn you. Or it might be 2. I have now going to go look up the YouTube video of this later on.
Well, I think the problem is you try and tell people that they should really, in their own interests, carry around a national ID card with a number on it, and the hell will break loose.
Yeah.
Even though they already have that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's why it has to be private industry, because it's like, well, if you'd like to get a credit card, then you need this number, and that will force that process without having to deal with politics.
Yeah, and then you look at some Altman's thing with the WorldCoin and scanning people's irises to prove, that they're human. That really kind of is a step in the direction towards that kind of identity as a service. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Indeed. All right, let's move on to Azure. So in December, I missed this article, but they announced a bunch of new AI capabilities to their Models as a Service program, which, first of all, they added Llama 2. Llama 2, of course, is the meta model, and that allows you to play with it, do specialization, etc. They've also added several multimodal AI capabilities, including DALL-E 3, GPT 3.5 Turbo, and GPT-4. And GPT-4 Turbo with Vision, as well as they now support fine-tuning of the Azure OpenAI, including Babbage 2, DaVinci 2, and GPT-35 Turbo. And GPT-4 updates the model, as well as ability for fine-tuning on GPT-4, all available to you now as Models as a Service, or MAS.
I just wish I had the money to play with it. Meaningfully. I mean, it's one thing
you could download Llama 2 on your laptop and use your new fancy ARM-based Mac processor, GPU.
I know I could try that. I have Llama 2 downloaded on this machine I'm on right now, but it's slow.
Yeah, I mean, try the GPUs on the Mac. See how it works. I don't know if it'll work or not.
I mean, I suspect it will. It's just how fast, right?
Yeah, how fast it'll be.
And you're not training, right? Like, it's the other thing too is when you're evoking these models through that, you're not building the models. There's a level of customization stuff where you still get into that, but you're exercising the already built models.
Yeah, no. Yeah. To test my knowledge of AI, if you're just accessing the model, that's where you use inference nodes.
That's right.
Okay.
Inference.
Starting to learn.
the problem is on smaller GPUs, which pretty much anybody has at home, you have to kind of round down the precision of the model to make it fit in memory sensibly. And so you chop off, they're 8-bit models, but you chop off the least significant 4 bits. So you really kind of impact the performance of the model. So it fits in memory.
I see.
So yeah, what I really want for Christmas is like an H100 or something, which is only $24,000.
Well, maybe by next year it will be cheaper.
We could start the worst GoFundMe ever.
But then the problem will be that the models now need more processing power. So you're always it's always a race.
No, they're going to continue to grow.
So I did find a Medium post that talks about how you can basically run Llama 2 on a Mac M1. And yeah, memory is of course the one problem that you would always have. And they also have Xformers, a bunch of stuff in here. So I'll send you a link.
Yeah, I mean, you can run it on CPU as well, because CPU's got a whole bunch of, it's nowhere near as fast on a CPU.
No.
But it does work.
Well, look forward to Jonathan telling us all about it someday. All right. That was kind of it for new news from the main three providers. So then I said, well, I'll go look at Oracle news because there's got to be something from Oracle I haven't talked about lately. And they hadn't anything either. So then we talked about DigitalOcean a few weeks ago and their managed Kubernetes service. And I said, well, what's going on over at DigitalOcean? And so I found a product update that I thought I'd share. So first of all, they do have that Kubernetes service that I mentioned. They also bought a AI company called Paperspace. So they have basically their own AI platform that supports the NVIDIA H100s, which I guess, Jonathan, you can run your model on DigitalOcean. Maybe that's a cheaper option for you to look into that.
Check it out.
Yeah. And then they have DigitalOcean Managed Kafka was just announced, which is a fully managed event streaming platform as a service. They also have a new backup capability, and they have a new scalable storage option for Postgres and MySQL managed instances that increases the storage without upgrading the full cluster. So you don't have to take downtime. They have some new DDoS capabilities, some new support things, and that's all the new stuff that they have right now that I care to talk about. But exciting to see. I with moving to Kubernetes and moving to containers, like the ability to use DigitalOcean for a lot of workloads is much more available for dev workloads. And something to check out if you are not totally locked into your cloud vendor in some terrible way. You might be able to run your dev instances here, or some of your smaller projects that don't need quite the same level of services. You get a pretty nice little setup here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm impressed by Managed Kafka and some of the other, the dabbling into the managed service aspects of cloud is not something that other than the big three have really dabbled in, which I'm pretty excited about. It's not just storage and compute. Sweet. I think that's pretty fantastic and definitely is something that I would try out. I don't know why I can have so much hatred for OCI, but I'm sort of rooting for the underdog in DigitalOcean on this. I think competition's great. It's awesome.
Well, I mean, it's hard to call Oracle an underdog in any concept. Yes, they might be the fourth cloud provider out there, but they're not an underdog in anything else.
Rabid dog, maybe. Yeah. All right, Paperspace on-demand pricing for an H100 is just under $9 an hour.
Oh,
or with a 3-year commitment, you can get it for $224 an hour. From $224 an hour.
Oh.
That's quite a commitment.
Comparison, how much is that exact same thing on Amazon? Do you know?
No, I'll check it out.
Let's see. It may not be as bad as you think.
I suspect that it's reasonably priced.
So it's about $1,500 a month.
If you run it for the full month, but I mean, Jonathan's not going to run it for the full month, is he?
Well, no, that was with the committed 3-year commitment.
Yeah, with the 3-year commitment.
Yeah. So it's about $60,000 over the 3 years.
Which would make sense if you're, trying to build that into your app.
I'll put it back on my Christmas list.
I mean, you can run it for an hour, Jonathan. It's only at $9.
Yeah.
You'll lose interest after 2. It's fine.
Yeah.
$18, worst case.
That's the trick.
Versus 21,000. I mean,
the interest is, it wanes, right? So it's not just 1 hour. It's not like you can get all it done. It's like, ooh, I have a new idea, and that'll be like 2 minutes. 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. And you're paying for the hour each time.
Yeah, when you're like an AI cooperative where people just pool to buy resources and then share them. I guess it's kind of like a cloud company.
Yeah.
We're creating a cloud on a cloud, guys.
Yeah. But non-profit.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, well, that's all I got, you guys. I scraped the bottom of the barrel for this week. The joy of recording a show between the 1st of January and the 8th when all the kids go back. And I assume that we'll start seeing some more news starting next week, as we usually do. And then we're heading into a busy first quarter and second quarter as we hit Google Next in April. That's like tomorrow, practically.
It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to feel like tomorrow all of a sudden. I know it. It's going to sneak up.
Sneak right on up on this. So, all right, guys, have a great week. See you next week.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel. Go to our website, thecloudpod.net for sign-up instructions.